One of the things about this record is that it's not available on traditional streaming platforms right now. It's not on Spotify. It's not on Apple. What's up, everybody? How you doing? Welcome back to the Punk Rock Review Podcast. Got Rob hanging out with me tonight. Boy, oh boy, it has been a, rocky week, man. It's been wild, dude. Lots of drama. I'm so glad to be back to just normal podcasting with the homie, talking about some good old punk rock. Yeah, dude, like drama-free podcast. I'm very excited to be back here talking to you, Rob. How's your week been, man?
It's been pretty good because I've been listening to Straight Ahead pretty much nonstop for a whole week. So I just been all angsty. Just walking around all angsty and angry at people. Dude, it's been awesome.
So I listened to it twice, right? Once in the car driving around, but I had to go to the dentist today. And I was literally listening to it while they're like messing with this molar I'm going to have to get removed. And so I'm like listening to that music while they're doing my tooth. I'm getting angrier and angrier. And I'm just like, oh, I got to turn this off. I had to stop playing the music because I was getting super aggro. But yeah, so today we're going to talk about two albums from 1999, Pennywise, Straight Ahead. But before that, we're going to talk about a Green Day side project. So before we get into Pennywise, Straight Ahead, what was it, March 30th? Okay, so Billy Joe Armstrong of Green Day has a couple of side project bands. He has like Foxborough Hot Tubs. I think he has another one, and then he also had Pinhead Gunpowder. And in the springtime, March 30th of 1999, they released an EP called Shoot the Moon. The reason that I know about that EP is odd because I was looking up Voodoo Glow Skull stuff. That's how I first found Shoot the Moon way long time ago. I don't remember what I was on, but it was on the computer. I didn't find it on like at a store or anything. I found it like online. Might have been through like LimeWire or something. And I was building like mixtape CDs. I didn't even like it a ton back then. I liked it okay, but it was kind of like, oh, okay. And then on to the next. Back then I was not a really big Green Day fan. So that would probably be why I didn't pay a lot of attention to it. And it had already been out for some years by then too. This is in like the early 2000s, like my early 20s. But I rediscovered it a few years ago. And then I rediscovered it like recently and just like, I forgot about this. And I really liked it a lot. So, okay. I'm going to read because the Wikipedia is really, really short on this. So it says, Shoot the Moon is the fourth EP by American punk rock band Pinhead Gunpowder. It was released on March 30th, 1999 through Adeline Records, which is substantial. Adeline Records is Billy Joe Armstrong's record label, also known for dropping stuff from One Man Army, a band everybody that's familiar with this channel knows that I love. It was re-released on CD and vinyl through Recess Records in February of 2010, and then again on vinyl in 2022 from 1234 Go Records, which is where I rediscovered it. Like the second rediscovery of this was from that label. I believe the one that I've got is probably from that label even. One of the things about this record is that it's not available on traditional streaming platforms right now. It's not on Spotify. It's not on Apple. We had to listen to it on YouTube. It's only 12 minutes in length. I think it's like 5 or 6 songs. Let's see. How many songs was it? 7. Okay, never mind. 7 songs. But they are all fairly short. Yeah, I don't know. So, okay. Being as that this wasn't on a traditional streaming platform, that makes it a little harder to get to and listen to. How'd you feel about this album, Rob? And did you like it at all, or had you heard it before?
Yeah, I hadn't heard. I knew of it. Like I knew of the concept of the band, but never really had given it a chance. So I listened to this, and then I kind of just poked around their stuff. It is exactly as it's kind of advertised. It's like if Green Day never became a pop band, what would they kind of sound like? And this is about pretty close to it, because it sounds a lot like Green Day, but just a little bit more I don't know if you'd say stripped down necessarily, because even like the early Green Day was like a little bit slower. This has like the pace of Green Day that you're used to, but it sounds just more like a rock band in the way in a more traditional like kind of sense. It almost sounds like these songs could have been are almost songs that eventually Green Day would whip into almost other style of songs. You can definitely
Right.
see that this was a spot with a little bit different style musically. It's not as like cute as like Billy would make a Green Day song.
Well,
It's a little more of just like a thicker sound, and I really like it. And it's got that it's got like a playfulness to it.
it does.
That
The
really gives
melody
it
is in it.
that kind of like that pop punk kind of feel that even Green Day's music doesn't necessarily always have. Green Day's music is a little bit like darker and
Sometimes it
more
gets dark.
intense.
Yes.
Yeah, this one's a little bit peppier, a little. It's like if Green Day was a Ramones core band, might be the better way to
Right.
put it. That's exactly what this sounds like.
The word that came to mind when you started talking was unrefined. It's like a Green Day track or a Green Day EP that's kind of unrefined. And I would say that the major difference to me that I heard in this and say a Green Day album, the drums. The drums are the major difference that I heard. The songs are written as well. The vocals are just as good. The lyrics are just as catchy. It's a little poppier to some degree,
Mm-hmm.
but the drums, they're more simple. They're not as intricate. They're
They're
not
not
as
as
heavy.
Yeah, these songs aren't as epic generally than the way the Green Day song.
Sure, yeah,
and
yeah.
the drums are a big part of that, like that almost like that
Correct.
jungle type of playing of Trey Cool is not there. Where this is more of just again like a Ramon style drum that just kind of goes with serves the song more so than leads the song. And they're a 4-piece, right? So the music is a little more crowded than
A little thicker.
what you would have on Green Day. And I think like Green Day very like self-consciously makes songs like with a certain certain things in mind and certain little like kind of tricks that they pull to really pull those out. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I mean they make great songs, but again, this is almost what you would assume. Like you could see Billy coming to like the studio with these songs, as we said earlier, and then giving them to the rest of the guys, and they would have a Green Day. So I do like that it exists, though. It's cool to just see that side of Billy and how he could go in that direction, because as time goes on, he's probably going to be thought of more as this great pop singer and this great pop star, but he really has this side to him and does it really really well.
If you look up photos from this album or from this era of them, he looks more like a punk rocker too. Like this is definitely early Billy Joe, like angsty, not quite sure what direction he wants to go in, keeping this band alive because they were doing stuff for quite a while Green Day was still blowing up. I wrote down a few things. I'm gonna read them off real quick. It won't take long because there wasn't a lot to talk about. Songs are all very quick. I put on the first song, Cabin Girl, is almost a rockabilly or lagwagon intro and verse. Then there are heavy Green Day influences on the chorus. Great little solo and bridge. This one ends with a sweet little acoustic outro. My boot in your face is what keeps me alive. I can hear some of what Billy Joe would eventually do in Father of All Mothers in this song. He wears his influences proudly. This one screams early Green Day, but without as good a drummer. Oof, I don't mean to be disrespectful. That did sound pretty disrespectful. My apologies. Then Asheville, a very familiar punk rock melody. I love this song. This EP is so good. A glimpse into what maybe he would have written if he had joined Rancid. This has some similarities, to Let's Go, but quite a bit poppier. On Junk Pile, there's some recycled melodies at the beginning, but I like it. I hear a little Offspring in that song. 27, early Green Day, off maybe Dookie sounds in this one, especially with Billy being the vocalist. That 90s Billy Joe snarl is actually really great. Then with Kathleen, we have more of the same melody at the beginning of this one. When the chorus switches it up pretty good and adds a harmonica, it's almost like they wanted this entire project to be listened to all the way through, kind of like The Decline, but with track names instead of just one long song. Aiken to be more of the Lagwagon meets Iron Chic, great poppy rock and roll punk. I can hear some Lucero type stuff in the guitar as well. And then I wrote a little note at the bottom. I put one of the rare projects that I hear, and then when it's over with, it was too fast. This was the first project I'd heard from Pinhead Gunpowder, and it's probably the reason I like them so much. I love the production, the songwriting, even though it gets a little repetitive at times. Even that is super catchy and a melody that I enjoy. The dual vocal duties make this really nice to listen to, and even the drummer's deficiencies appeal to me. I'm glad I wrote that down. This is an 8.5 out of 10 for me. If there were maybe 2 more songs and a little more variety, it would have gotten a straight up 10. That was my actual just little review of it.
And it's nice too because it's you can kind of get in and out with it pretty easy. Like as far as an EP, it goes quick because like you said, the songs are poppy and peppy and they're fun to listen to. It's just an enjoyable listen.
Really is.
It's one of those things that I don't know that I would necessarily listen to on like regular rotation. Like it really doesn't move me in
Okay.
that way. It's more something that I would like to just be reminded of, and then and then go back and listen. And be like, oh yeah, this was really good. This was a really cool side of Green Day, which is kind of how I view it. I know it's only one member of the band, but I view it as sort of a side, not a side project, and so they do
Like
on
an
the side,
offshoot.
but yeah, but just like a perspective of Green Day almost, or like almost like a different Green Day lens is kind of how I ultimately
Well,
sort of see this project.
I do like this band enough to put it in regular rotation. I like Green Day, and over the last few weeks, I've listened to Green Day Dookie so much that I think my opinion has shifted back to like quite enjoying that album. I used to not
Mm,
really like it much
yeah.
because it had these weird memories attached to it, right? These feelings. But I think I've listened to it so much that I'm also starting to remember other things that were positive from that era of my life. A lot of my life back then was pretty dark. Uh, he's got a number of side projects. I would say that this is probably the most notable. I want to hear Foxborough Hot Tubs. I've never listened to them, but I hear that they sound like Father of All quite a bit. And I listened to that album earlier this week too, just to kind of get a feel for like the comparisons that I was making in my head.
Mm.
I love that album, dude. Like I don't see how anybody could that likes Saviors can outright hate Father of All. Now I'm not saying that they're the same thing. But I'm saying that if I could probably pick out 3 songs minimum off of Father of All and let somebody that's not super familiar with Saviors go, hey, what album is this off of? They'd probably say Saviors. People that aren't into the band, I could probably play them side by side and people would say, yeah, it sounds very similar. So you can see where they were headed with that album is my point, is that Saviors is probably what it is because of that album, because it's got a lot of it in there. And I'm saying all that because this album reminds me of some of the Father of All music. Like it's got this like much more lighthearted. A lot of their music is dark. A lot of it's big and grand as well. You don't think of Green Day as an operatic band very often, but they really are.
Mm-hmm.
They're big and they're grandiose. They have these crazy songs sometimes, especially with American Idiot. They did this
They just found a way to make pop punk grandiose. Like that's
Yeah.
sort of the genius of Green Day. They figured out how to make pop punk into basically arena rock and how to
Right.
and do that. And this is that element kind of not there.
Right, and so that's what I liked about that album, Father of All, is that it's just in and out real quick. And there's a lot of parallels. Is my only point. I don't mean to like trash anything. I wasn't trying to do that at all. I just this gives me a similar feeling, a very positive vibe, lighthearted in nature. That's really what it is. You nailed it with that. This is it's positive. It's not. It doesn't feel negative at all. There's no dark. The tone, it doesn't shift. It's an EP. It's in and out. It's only 13 minutes,
Yeah.
so it's like it doesn't have time to get really intricate with its feelings. You know, there's no therapy sessions in this record. It's more like straightforward pop punk rock and roll. Not a lot to talk about with it either, really.
No, but I'm glad we brought it up and maybe brought some awareness to it. Maybe some people will check it out.
I do think that's kind of what I was aiming for. Is I wanted to just kind of celebrate the album for a few minutes, talk about it for a minute, jump back in and listen to it again for a few minutes, because there's a lot of records that we love that we like. There's a lot of records we like. We don't even love them. We like them. But over the years, they get lost in the shuffle, man. It's hard. It's really hard to keep up with all this stuff. It's so much work.
And I think it's gotten harder over the years because like if you had one of these EPs, and you just like you were tired of whatever else you were listening to, so you went to it. Nowadays, the way we consume this stuff, man, whatever you absolutely like is right in front. Like every time I open my phone, it's Bad Religion or the Descendants or Rancid. It kind of actually, even though there's like the Discover the New One tab, it really actually doesn't facilitate that. It's more that I kind of keep listening to the same stuff over and over and over again.
Oh, that whole discover this new stuff thing is so not helpful. I mean, okay, I don't want them to take it away. My point is that I very rarely indulge in it. I don't either. Yeah. I'd rather listen to Out Come the Wolves again, or you know, or some old classic
Like
punk album.
I'm more like look at it to see, okay, if there's new stuff out, maybe I'm gonna go check that out. But
Is it an old band putting out new stuff that I
yeah,
can
I do
listen
that. Like,
to?
oh my, Joe Shoe, okay, they're still around, cool.
All right.
Is kind of how I look at it, and it is natural because we get lazy, you know, because
Oh yeah.
we're gonna like the stuff that's comfortable, that's familiar to us, that we don't have to think of. Okay, which one do I want to go check out? And I think like albums like these ones, like we've talked about the last couple of weeks, they're albums that you have because you literally have, and they kind of get into, and you might not even memorize all the little parts. That's the other thing. Now we can listen to stuff over and over and really, and you listen to it and you remember like those parts every time you listen to it. Like, okay, yes, this is where that part comes in. And it's a
Right.
really lost art, and that's why I'm glad again that we bring up some of these albums, especially one like this that literally only exists in physical form officially.
Yep. I mean, I was glad that I find it on YouTube because it is kind of a pain in the butt to listen to, but I like it. It gives it a little bit of I couldn't remember the word I was looking for earlier, but it gives it makes it a little special to me that it's something that we only have if we work to find it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that we can just. I do like that. It has got pros and cons. Let's be honest, but I think that the pros are make it a little bit special. In my personal opinion.
Oh yeah,
because I like the fact that you have to work towards something. It's just like listening to a record versus listening to a playlist. I like to do that because it takes a little bit of work for me to do it, to get to it.
In our case, the hard work was getting off of the Spotify app and onto the YouTube app. So that was a real.
I mean, it was incredibly taxing.
Yeah, that one.
I
Really
I had to think for about a second and a half. I don't like doing that.
No. Well, you know me. I like to have multiple distractions going at all times, so I couldn't watch the YouTube video as I was listening to something. Now,
yes. I mean, it's still very easy to digest or ingest, rather. Excuse me. But you know, I know people that wouldn't get off of Spotify to find another good record on YouTube. I know people like that.
That's just where they get their music from, and that's it. Yeah.
Yep. So I'm looking for a note that I wrote down. I can't find it, so I guess it's just lost. Oh well, whatever. Yeah, dude. Pinhead Gunpowder, Shoot the Moon. I think 8.5 for me personally is a great numbered grade for that because it represents exactly how I feel about it. I do think if there's a little more variety and a little more length, I would have given it a flat out 10 because I really enjoyed it. What kind of grade would you give that album?
Yeah, probably about that 7 or 8 range.
Yeah.
Not really thinking about what it would compare to that it would have that same kind of score, but just if I give it, like, I listen to it and give it a thumbs up, and yeah, that was pretty much right in the zone of stuff I like. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, how do you feel about Weezer? We've talked about that a little bit.
Complex thoughts on them, to be honest with you.
I think maybe we'll reserve that for another day. Weezer's Blue album just turned, I think 30, maybe 25, but I think 30.
Yeah, it probably sounds like 30 because that'd be like early 90s. So I want to say.
Yeah, on the 10th it turned 30 years old. I didn't get an opportunity to do a live stream because I was doing some other stuff, but
yeah, we should dedicate some time to that. That feels like worth talking about.
So next week we're doing Blink-182's Enema of the State, and what was the other one?
The Donnas.
The Donnas, was it Turn 21?
I think so. The one they came out with in '99, which
is
it Grown Up maybe, or
yeah, we'll figure it out.
We're saying the same thing, but yeah.
I know, right? But they have all their albums sound like they all have similar names like that. Do you want to do Weezer instead of the Donnas, or would you like to do Donna still?
I really want to do that Donna segment because that one's important.
Okay,
we could push the Weezer back. Weezer doesn't really need the time stamp on there, I think, as much because it's more of because we're not. I don't think we're going to talk about necessarily everything. I mean, we'll talk about the album quite a bit, but I think the impact of Weezer, because they're so adjacent to the music that we talk about a lot. So I think we need to talk about like their impact.
Well, that's kind of why I wanted to talk about it at some point. So. What about the week after? We'll dedicate a little bit of time to Weezer's Blue album.
Yeah, that'll be good.
All right, I'll come up with something for the first half of that video next couple of days, and we'll have that week will be planned out too.
That'll be a fun one to put back. Speaking of the rotations on the
I haven't listened to that in a long time. I'm kind of itching to hear it. Was why I brought it up.
I've never let's talk about an album I've never streamed. Like I had the Blue album back in the day, and I've listened to it fairly regularly. I don't think I've ever I get afraid on my Spotify to like Weezer can lead
Dude,
you down other. So I don't want to. I
yes.
never want to mess with my algorithm. So that's the other reason why I don't discover new stuff sometimes. I'm like, no, that's not coming in there. No. If I'm here with doing dishes or something, and I got this stuff playing, I am not letting that crap get through. No. Even though, like, I don't even dislike Weezer, but something that could get associated with Weezer would
Well,
possibly do that.
that's the issues. It's not Weezer I'm worried about. It's what they bring with them.
Yeah, the riffraff.
The riffraff, dude. All right. So in 2 weeks, on June 1st, we'll be celebrating the 25th anniversary of, I think, your favorite Pennywise album?
Yep.
Okay. June 1st, 1999, we got Pennywise Straight Ahead. I'm going to let you take the lead on this one, man, because this is your favorite Pennywise album, and I love this record too, so we got plenty to talk about.
Yeah, so we're here 1999. As I always say, it is just, and it's not the thing is about Pennywise, we've talked about this a lot. We even talked about this last week. We can say that they're either redundant, they're consistent, they have a lot of the same, and you and I have argued, somewhat against that point as a negative and against that point generally when you listen to their music. I will say though, like when we did our album rankings, it was very hard to do Pennywise because Pennywise has actually quite a bit of quality on a lot of their albums. They don't have a down album. There's not that one, even the album with the other singer we kind of have put to the side because it was a little bit different, but they don't really have like a what were they thinking kind of album, and everything is pretty good. And there's always like a couple of hits or live staples that kind of come out of every one of their albums. So Straight Ahead
Agreed.
is my number one, just slightly over About Time and Land of the Free. And for me again, it really is splitting hairs, but the way I look at it, Pennywise's Straight Ahead is kind of like the Pennywise set. I like to think of it as like what are like all the huge Pennywise songs. Now, Bro Him and Fuck Authority are probably their two most iconic songs, and neither one of those are on this album.
Isn't that weird how that happens though?
Yeah, but pretty much everything else that you think of by the band, or a lot of what you think of, Greed, My Own Country, Can't Believe It, Victim of Reality, Straight Ahead, In My Own Way, Alien, those are staples of a Pennywise live set, of any Pennywise fans. Like that is really, you could almost convince me that this was like the greatest hits of Pennywise, and I would have kind of
For real.
believed you because it has so many of the songs that are really
So many
just
hits.
a big, yeah, they're part of like the culture of the band. That's why I was saying I was going around all angsty because this album is a very sing along type of album, and the band has a lot of these sing along type of things. But Straight Ahead has like this really sweet spot that I think they started really hitting in the late '90s and early 2000s, where some of the earlier Pennywise, it was Jim putting in a lot of vocal words into these verses that were going really, really fast, and he does a pretty good job of it. But here, the vocals, in some sense, is a little bit simpler in certain spots, and it's not that like he doesn't have the same bite that it did, but it's him getting in a little bit lesser words. So I think there's quite a bit of like hooks on this album that are sprinkled in through just the skate punk, pretty much assault that this album is. All the way through. Late in the album, there's a few spots where the rhythm gets a little bit slower, and there's a few more like drony songs, and then Alien, which was the song that had the video and like the big song that came out of it, that's a slower one. But most of this album is at a pretty brisk skate punky kind of in your face pace with bridges and breakdowns, usually like 3/4 of the way through the song, and that was kind of the formula on this one. But it, like I can close my eyes and listen to this album, and you just see like surfers and skaters and half pipes, and it just
real though
feels like that. Like it feels like maybe the best version of that kind of stuff.
Yes. So my thoughts real quick on that are, I think I might have said that this was my favorite sound album as far as what they've done. It's not my favorite Pennywise album, but the way this one sounds is better than all their other albums to me. I think this is the perfect skate punk, like sonically. I don't think you can make it better than this album. I mean, I think out of the whole record, let me pull up my Spotify. There's only like 1 or 2 songs that aren't songs that I absolutely love and have on playlists.
And there's a lot of songs on this album, so that's really impressive.
You know what I'm saying? So like if you can get a record that has what is it? How many songs is this? 17
17
songs.
songs.
1, 2,
Dang.
3, 4.
4820. Jeez.
Yeah, so there's 4 songs that I don't really love. Those would be Alien, Just for You, Need More, and Never Know. Like the second half of the album isn't as strong as the first half to me. But even those songs, I would still have them in like a on rotation somewhere. It wouldn't bother. It would.
Yeah,
I could listen to the LP front to back and not be bothered by any of it. It's fantastic.
And I pretty much I would say the Alien exception, that's about what the bottom tier of my list would be too on these songs, but they fit on the album perfect. It's not like you need to get past them to get to the good songs.
No, it's not a pain in the butt or anything.
As you are listening to it. I mean, I can't think of another album that's over the 40-minute mark that I don't automatically complain about how long it is. I'm stunned that this album is 48 minutes long, that I'm looking at that.
Oh, really?
It just doesn't feel like that to me.
That was my only issue with it while I was listening to it this week, was that it was a little bit long. But
and it is like objectively it is, and there's a mix of some shorter songs, and there's a 4-minute song in there, so it's kind of all over the place. But we've talked about it before, man. Sometimes these punk bands just put out everything they had every single time. They didn't really leave a ton of like developed stuff on the cutting floor, and so all these albums from the 90s have all this. I think it might have been too. I know like it wasn't a full thing. I think the capacity was up with the CDs too, of how much they can fit on there. So I wonder how much like that plays into it too with a lot of these late 90s stuff.
A CD was
so long.
I think a CD was like 90-minute capacity, or maybe it was 70 or something like that. It was over an hour, but
I want to say it was 70, and then it got moved up to 90. I think both those numbers are true. I think that's why you're saying that. But yeah, it was. I think it was longer than what a cassette.
No, cassettes could be like 120 minutes total.
No, I don't. Okay, maybe that's just my BS theory. I don't know, but it feels like a lot of these 90s punk albums have. We keep saying this. They have a lot of songs, and they're pretty long.
I think my theory is a little different. I think that back then, studio time was harder to come by.
Mm-hmm.
A release was more important back then. Like right now, you could drop 5 albums or 5 EPs or 5 singles or 6 singles in a year, no problem. Back then, it was not like that. If you had an album, it was important. It was coming out. That was a priority to you. So you didn't necessarily want to leave anything on the cutting room floor. So like that is got its pros and cons. But I think it's because back then, time in the studio wasn't as easy to get, and I think that getting a record out wasn't as easy back then.
Yeah, and you're right too. You couldn't monetize it the way you could now, where you could do a drop here, a drop there. The 7-inch release. I mean, you still can do those. You could have done those things, but it just wouldn't have had.
Well, yeah, nobody was buying singles like that back then. Those things didn't last. Like they weren't as popular. I have a couple because I'm a collector, but that's
no, and especially with this type of music, that didn't really exist as a thing. Like when I think of even singles that I had, they were singles of like pop songs that I got like at the Walmart for $4. That it was kind of like an accessible way to get a copy of this. And this is when I think of like Epitaph, and we talk about it all the time, like what is like the signature Epitaph band? Well, obviously it's kind of Bad Religion because they're inherent to that. But right after that, I might say Pennywise, as far as like that sound and stuff. And like when you think of like what Epitaph really like feels like and what they mean, I think of like skate punk, and I think of like Pennywise being the sort of anchor of that type of sound that they put out.
I would say Pennywise, and then like as like a 1A, I would have to put Rancid, but Rancid did Hellcat. And so for that reason, I would say Pennywise is probably correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think Rancid too is it's a little bit of its own bean. So that's why they're slightly less associated maybe with Epitaph, even though like, them staying with Epitaph and all that is part of it. But I guess that's why I'm saying you almost say the ones that are true and associated are the ones that didn't get quite as big, because like that is what they have is being an Epitaph band, which they were all the way till 2008 when they had the chance to put out the album through the MySpace.
What are they doing now?
I thought they were back on Epitaph, or they're like quasi-independent. Let me look.
I was trying to look it up, but I wasn't seeing anything. But I'm also trying to make sure I don't miss something that you said.
Yeah, and I want to say, I know this is way off of what we're talking about. When they did the MySpace album, they still basically had a really good relationship with Epitaph, and I think Epitaph partially released it to him. MySpace just offered him a whole ton of money.
That has always been weird to me that they did something with MySpace,
as you might imagine. Yeah, and that was in like they came back to Epitaph for the last couple of albums. Yeah, that was in that era too, where MySpace was actually becoming nothing but a music site. So I think it kind of makes sense in a way, but Pennywise isn't exactly the demographic of what the MySpace music was. They're like a slight generation removed, but not the craziest thing in the world. I'll tell you what, Pennywise is a band, and this album in particular, that I would share with a lot of people that weren't necessarily like into punk.
Okay.
And Pennywise is not a band you would necessarily think of that would be like that because they're such a punk band. They're such a skate punk band.
Dude,
But
I
but
I get
skate though, that's the thing.
okay.
The people that are into like a lot of the skate culture and stuff were really into Pennywise. Like that they were into all kinds of types of
Oh,
rock,
dude, their
but
music's all over skate videos.
they loved Pennywise, and a lot of
Yeah.
people. This album in particular, I just feel like I don't know if it was just where I was at and the time period and stuff, but a lot of people just loved these songs and were just really really into Pennywise, and they're not people that were really into punk in any other way. I mean, they
Well,
didn't dislike punk, but that wasn't their thing.
that actually kind of leads into my point on this is that I
Mm.
get told frequently that Pennywise is like either a pop punk band or not punk rock. I don't really understand that. I do think they have a little bit more hardcore in their music than I initially thought. Like upon like deep dives, I hear a lot of hardcore riffs and stuff. Got a little bit of thrashy stuff in there, but they're like sonically speaking, they're a punk rock band.
I've always thought
They
with
have
them,
punk rock lyrics. They have punk rock. I don't get it. I don't
if
understand
you
it.
ask me what kind of music you like, I say punk rock. But then you ask me, well, what is punk rock? And if I had to just explain like what the sound is, I probably would put up Pennywise is a very good example of what punk rock kind of ideally in my brain always kind of sounds like. And I don't really get that as you're saying too, because like they're very similar to say like a band like NoFX, but a band like NoFX can much easier be considered like pop punk. I would say like the NoFXs and the Lagwagons and those kind of fat bands sound very similar to Pennywise, but they have like that sillier kind of jokey, more pop punky side to them. These guys are more. They're also a lot like say like a Bad Religion or one of those, but they don't have like the rock side necessarily, the rock and roll side that Bad Religion brings into that. They're very much what they are. These kids who were just slightly younger than the Black Flags and the Circle Jerks and all that. They were kind of
Right.
like teenagers in that scene who also come up through the 90s and refine that sound. It's more of that. It's very similar to the Offspring. It's that 80s sound brought up with like that the 90s culture and technology kind of mixed into it. They just don't deviate much from what they do. That is sort of their calling card. Is there is a certain quality standard that they have, and again, I don't know what other genre. I understand pop punk in that it was popular punk and it was in video games, but as far
Yeah.
as pop punk, I don't like. I could make that case for a lot of other bands that are closer to them than I ever
Right.
really would to Pennywise. And at the same time, like yeah, punk unless skate punk can't be punk, then I don't know how you would define Pennywise. Like that's
Yeah. I think
yeah.
people like to just gatekeep, myself included. I've been guilty of it.
Yeah,
I've been trying to be as
the-
self-aware as I can lately. I've been trying to like
Pennywise has their haters though. We should
Yeah.
say that they like for a band that doesn't really deserve it. Like you could say like there's no effects haters, but like that kind of makes sense. Like you kind of get why there could be no effects haters. Pennywise has like people
Well, yeah,
seem to have
Fat Mike's
problems
a
with
dick.
yeah, so it makes sense. Pennywise, I think people who don't like their music just don't like everything about them. They don't like their fans. They don't like that. They're just kind of that kind of thing that I do like sort of hear in the discourse a little bit. But also Pennywise also has very dedicated, as I said, specific fans that are only fans of them, or people who just love Pennywise like you and I do and like kind of swear by Pennywise as just one of the bands that's a stalwart. If you if you like this stuff that we like they're such a cornerstone band. You and I think both had them on our top 10 bands list. Every time we did an instrument ranking, we had one of the members of the band sort of on our
Dude.
top 10s. They're really, really, I mean, good and important. Whatever you
How
want to
you
say.
could say
and punk more than anything is just God, they're punk.
yes, and I'm sorry for cutting you off. How you could say you're a fan of punk rock music and then not like Pennywise, I genuinely don't understand it because their recording quality is good. The vocals are good. You can hear what he's saying. The lyrics are good. They're political without being pretentious. They're important. They're evergreen. They're always relevant. The guitar playing is pretty great. The only thing that I wish they had was some solos in their music, but it doesn't matter enough to make me not want to like jam it all the time. But dude, they really are a top band for me. And it's funny because I've had people okay, I'm not gonna say who it was because not that they're even listening at this point, they
Mhm.
probably aren't. But like, I had a person say that Pennywise was not real punk. It was just a bunch of bros, like what they call. I think they call them jocks. And then like a week or two later, I did another video, and the guy was like, "Look at these fashion punk posers," and I was like, "All right, bro. If Pennywise isn't punk because they're jocks and they're wearing hats that you and I would wear and Dickie shorts and Vans." These guys aren't punk because they're fashion punk posers because they have mohawks instead of jackets.
Which one is it? Yeah.
Well, like, so is only the crusty, poor street kids that wear nothing but faded black shirts and disgusting pants? That's what the only people that are punk to you? It's so frustrating to me. Which it shouldn't matter. I shouldn't care at all, but it does
No,
bother me.
but that was, and that's what I said. You're referring to the exact criticism I always hear, that they're like a jock band or they're like a
Yeah,
bro-y band, and it's
yeah,
well, okay, they do have the song "Bro Him." Yes, they
yeah.
do
But that
that,
means
and
brother, not bro.
yeah, and
Like
a lot of like I have a note in there. It's very much sweaty men music. Is very much what Pennywise is.
I mean, it really is.
So there is that, and I think they are embraced by, again, other parts of like culture, like
Well,
skate
skate
culture,
culture and like X Games culture is
surf
got a
culture.
little
Yeah, they were
bit
in a lot of
of
those surf
the
videos. They were always in the Tony Hawk games. They're always in even the other sports games that would license music. Brett was really good about always getting those guys onto those games. You hear their music
it
sometimes
fits.
at like football games and stuff. So it does fit. They're a
Well,
very like intense, kind of high testosterone type of band like that, but I don't. They're not like. Are you listening to these lyrics and stuff? If you're gonna call them like a broy jock band, like
you know,
the two things don't really go together once you actually dive into this band.
the other band that falls into that is Hatebreed.
Mm-hmm.
Those two bands are like the separation between like jocks and punks. It's Hatebreed and Pennywise. So Hatebreed for hardcore, obviously, Pennywise for
Mm-hmm.
punk rock. And it's because in any kind of gym where there's weightlifting, you might hear some Pennywise, you might hear some Hatebreed. But any like street kid punk rocker might be jamming some Hatebreed, might be jamming some Pennywise because the lyrics. So the sound is it's this weird connection between those two worlds. And when you go to shows, that's where you get shit like violence because you have these two different cultures that just clash, and it's wild, man. I've seen it happen many times. Honestly, more with the Hatebreed crowd than the Pennywise crowd, but
And we should also note too, with Pennywise, we've talked about it before, and they've talked about it. The whole thing about the fashion and all that, which you and I both very much are descendants of Pennywise fashion, even on and off screen when we
yeah,
have spoken to each other. But like they've always said, them and Bad Religion and Lagwag, they're from California. So it's just it's
right.
more of that they are the style of the area. You're not really done up. You're going surfing all the time. You're skating. You're kind of,
Yeah, I mean,
it's just kind of it was just part of that kind of culture. Wasn't as like it was less about the fashion in that way than London and New York and um some of these other scenes, or even LA, which is more of like this still this late night club kind of party, whereas like, again, I still think of like that 80s punk, that stuff's happening at like Whiskey a Go Go, and I think of Pennywise happening in like an afternoon on a really hot day in someone's like backyard, and that's kind of the vibe of that style
at like a
of music.
barbecue with a skate ramp in the back.
Yeah. Maybe it's just a fever dream that I have all
It's
the
a
time.
California thing, man. They're very California, just
Yeah,
like
and their music sounds like it too. Like some of these
yeah.
songs, like I was gonna say, like "Victim of Reality," just it sounds like a song for cruising down like an LA highway, and you could see some dude. Again, I'm fitting into the stereotype, like some bro with Oakleys, I guess, kind of sitting in there. But it has that kind of, it's got that kind of vibe. But as you said, is a little bit deeper than that, in a band that definitely espouses a completely different message. Like again, their biggest song on this album, the hit is "Alien," a song about alienation, about being different, about not fitting into society and creating your own way. And it's a very different spirit than a jockey broy kind of band.
California has a few of those bands, though. I mean, think about it. You have like Sublime,
Mm-hmm.
very much like a California band. That if that band was in New York, they wouldn't have ever gotten big. I don't think.
Well, and I think
Like
Pennywise's like spirit sister, The Offspring, is very much like that too. Like The Offspring are extremely California
people get
in the way they're
so
coming
mad
off.
when we compare those two bands, but they sound so
Well, I have
similar.
in my notes here, like Straight Ahead is kind of very similar to Smash. It's got a lot of the parts of Smash and
Huh.
a lot of that mid '90s offspring, and then even the song Straight Ahead. Listen to the music in it, and it sounds like Come Out and Play. Do 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 do. You're straight
Okay.
ahead. It's your fucking life. I mean, I can do a great job
Huh.
of humming it, but
Okay.
it's got that same kind of thing. We've talked about it. I mean, excuse me, Noodles and
Noodles.
Fletcher sound so similar. Noodles does more
That I
things, and
agree with.
he adds a little bit more flair and fills and all that. But if you scale back a lot of what Noodles does, it's a lot of it sounds a lot like Fletcher. And we talked about band size, and I've always thought this is pretty important with Pennywise. They're a 4-piece, but only 3 of them
Yeah.
play instruments. So you got the drummer. You have 2 bass players. Now, like this album starts out on Greed and some of these songs with those big bass intros. And it's crazy because they lost their bass player, took his own life a couple of years before this album came out. And Randy, Bradbury steps in and really does honor to, the guy who wrote Bro Him and wrote the bass line of Bro Him. And you see some of these songs and they're really carried by that. And then Fletcher, like the whole thing, as you said, there's no solos. I assume Fletcher probably doesn't have the capability. He strikes me as just that sort of like power chord rhythm guitarist that can play anything
I would
at
be
any
fairly
speed.
surprised if he could just shred.
Yeah, I think he's very much in that Johnny Ramone tradition where he kind of learned how to do those things. He's got tons of charisma. I think he's a part of their songwriting, definitely a part of their persona. And then Jim, I always wonder, is Jim actually like a good singer? I know these songs are great and he fits the songs great.
Ooh,
And he does
okay.
I've checked out his solo stuff and it's okay, but I've always wondered like because most of these guys that are frontmen, I generally think could have been like solo artists, like in their own thing. Like they were good and they could have found other things. I don't know about Jim if I would have really taken to
I've
Jim
never
as
listened to his solo material. I'm sorry.
yeah, and it's I've listened to a little bit, and it's like I don't judge that necessarily because it's like that singer songwriter kind of acoustic stuff, so it's pretty good for what it is. You know what I mean? But and you can hear what he's like in a slower register because it happens on some Pennywise songs. But I think his voice, I've always wondered like does it only fit these Pennywise songs or would he be a good guy? I remember like in the F Word documentary, whenever he leaves Pennywise and he talks about like, well, I could do soundtrack stuff and other vocal stuff, and I'm like, can Jim actually sing? And I don't even mean that as like a derogatory thing. I just can't like kind of disassociate him from these songs and wonder like if that's why that works. Again, it kind of feels like a weird point because I'm not trying to bury him in any way. I'm saying that like he fits these songs so perfect because he's such a key part of that kind of deep voice he has. He's very authoritative in the way he talks, where he's both like this
Oh, you
real
think he's got a deep voice?
like the rasp, like the
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
So like
Yeah.
like gravelly kind of.
Gravelly, like it's funny that he has the reputation of the punk rock dad. I've always thought he had like just a grown man voice, especially like those mid albums. The early album, he's a little kind of high pitchy, and even on like Victim of Reality, but for the most part, he always sounds like a grown man to me. The way that he
That okay,
sings.
that I agree with, but he's always got like a mid-range vocal to me. I don't think he's ever sounded deep or high on his vocal, like I guess
Yeah, no,
pitch is the
that's a
word.
better
I
way
don't
to
know.
say it. I don't know what the musical term is for grown man voice, but but whatever
Yeah.
it is,
Like a mid-range vocal.
yeah. And he doesn't like always sing super fast either. It's not like last week we were talking about AFI and Davey's doing this,
Yeah.
and it's a little more in and out, especially on this album, as I mentioned earlier. Whatever he's going in and out and creating these real chanty kind of songs. Like they're part of why I said like this. We criticize artists today that they're making songs for TikTok and they're making songs that are 30 seconds and all
We
this
do
stuff.
criticize that a lot.
And I'm going to criticize Pennywise again for making songs that are just meant to be enjoyed in 110-degree summer festivals with a bunch of other sweaty dudes on the side of you.
Let's hear it for sweaty
Singing,
dudes.
singing, it's all greed, or, government, and people just singing along every single word of every one of those songs. So
They're anthemic.
yeah, it's like this kind of like choral feature that it's got to them, and it's like again, think about the Pennywise fans. They're such a big part of the band. Is that Pennywise fan of it? That's part of it. Is like it's it's this musical thing where you're into the songs and they're generally performed very well. They have this intense energy. There's a pacing to them. It feels like I don't know. Again, like I just equate Pennywise to like hard work and a hot day. It's just kind of what like that
I
crappy
mean,
feeling of those kind of like, just getting through that. I think a lot of us have got through a lot of hard work and hot days listening to like a lot of Pennywise
oh,
and that sort
we
of
really
just
have.
that type of music. No, I mean I could go on and on about this band in particular, but this album I think they really they hit a stride here, and it's not like the other albums didn't around this time. I just happened to really like these songs that were
Yeah.
on this album in particular, and again I think they have just enough melody. I think is exactly the key. They hit just enough melody to make them catchy, but they're fun and heavy enough and intense enough to really make you feel like you're exhausted by the end of one of these
Well,
shows or one of these albums.
one of the things about Pennywise is that they are catchy. They are melodic. It is music that'll get stuck in your head. But the lyrical content, this is a good. I think they're a really great entryway punk band for a number of reasons. But they're also a band that a lot of the longtime punk rockers like. They're really, what's the word I'm looking for here, man? Like they're
Like accessible or
excuse
universal?
me, like malleable. Like they could fit a bunch of different
Mm.
molds. You know what I'm saying? So like if you have some kid who's like riding a BMX bike and he's like, man, what kind of music do you like? Man, I like your jacket, dude. And he sees like my Grimple patch. I could get him to Grimple through Pennywise,
Yeah.
or No FX even. You know what I'm saying? Like stuff like that. And but the lyrical content, once you scratch the surface and you go beneath the first couple of layers, you get into some really deep content. They have lyrics about addiction, abuse, political stuff. And like I said earlier, their music's kind of evergreen. Their political topics are usually stuff that are important or relevant all the time. You know, they're talking about, instead of talking about George Bush, they're just talking about how we're getting screwed over by our lawmakers. And you know what I'm saying?
Well, and
So
I wanted to say something really quick on that because I've been thinking about that a lot this week. Because
absolutely not, Rob. We're not doing it tonight, buddy.
we're,
No, I'm
we're not
playing.
letting you go on
Okay.
these long diatribes.
We're not. We're not. Yeah. Yeah.
As
I'm not going to sit here for 15 minutes and not say anything.
Yikes. Okay, so I've done a lot of like research on this over the years, so I'm not just pulling this out of my head, but like, okay, so in American punk rock, as far as authority figures, there has been two central villains, and that is, of course, the goat of the villain of American punk rock, which would be Ronald Reagan,
Ronald
and the
Reagan.
second one is George W. Bush. Those guys made really, really good villains. Like
Yep.
it's just a good and like Reagan penetrated like all of like you can argue a lot basically all of like 80s rock of almost every form was like a rock against Reagan. Now it took a little bit longer with Bush to become as polarized as he did, but once he did, it was really easy again for Green Day and these guys to kind of make these epic albums. Now it's not just a left-right thing because it also happened in the case of George H.W. Bush as well.
Yeah.
Once you didn't have those guys in power, some people just kind of turn off their brain automatically when there's just not the villain there, and other people I think like it's hard because we live in this stupid duopoly where it's like okay,
Right.
I'm not gonna vote for the psychos over here. I'm gonna vote for this piece of crap over here. It's kind of like our
I mean,
American
that's
thing.
kind of the problem is that it's
Right?
very,
It's a limited amount of choice. It's an extremely limited one that other democracies, quite frankly, don't even do because they tend to have more options. My point to all that is, I think it's a little harder to like, again, like the Rock against Clinton thing didn't really work as well. It just didn't
Yeah.
have the same sort of resonance. Not to say that people weren't pissed off, and in fact, like Clinton was such a polarizing president. I think people forget that he just got transferred as just another authority figure. There just wasn't like, at least on the more like California liberal side of things, there wasn't like that specific anger towards him the way that started developing in the South because they already had that history with them, and then everything got really polarized. So I say all that to say that what these bands did is they sort of take that thing of this sort of end of history thing that a lot of media had in the late 90s is we've basically solved the world and here's where we are. That was kind of that whole end of history thing you have in the 90s. And I think punk has a little bit of that too, but what these 90s punk bands do, it's almost like every one of these songs, and it's even Green Day has it, The Offspring has it, Rancid has it. It's kind of like an episode of Cops almost, or like it's almost like this reality show of, okay, our society's cool. We did everything. We won everything. We defeated communism, yada, yada, yada. And it still sucks. and everything
I mean,
still sucks. And look how crappy this works. And a lot of this stuff is about like more local injustice than like national injustice. You think a lot of songs in the '90s about police reform and state violence
well,
like that, so it's less of this big sort of monster Darth Vader the way like Reagan and Bush are, and more of just
right.
the whole of society. Like, look at what we have become is more of
Well,
the
there's like a
criticism.
disgust in our culture, in our like Western culture. It's
Yeah.
now look, I don't find the same amount of disgust in it that some people do,
Right.
but I'm realistic. I know that we are far from a perfect place. I think that there's a lot of nastiness that goes on here, but I'm also grateful for the freedoms that we've got and that we're able to even talk about it, right? But when you don't have a super polarizing figure to point at and like attack, I think specifically political punk starts to get a little watered down, and a little bit.
Well, and that's part of why
complacent.
the more like party level punk took over. I think in the '90s, like that was part of it, because you didn't really know. You didn't know who to be mad at in the '90s, or necessarily if you should be mad, because
Facts.
there is all this like now we live in like the worst of both worlds, where everyone's mad, and we're mad at our technology, and we're mad at our technology made us like really much. We very much now
I mean,
in this
you're
time
not
period
wrong.
we live in the hangover of this, and that's like this, and there's a lot of like bad religion. And a lot of it is really coming to terms with like the technical world. And I always say it's a lot of it. It almost looks like like your TV set in the evening, especially in the '90s. Like now we watch like reality TV, or we like to escape into other stuff, or we watch people. And the '90s is the start of like reality TV, but it's also like trash TV. Like we loved seeing like human decline. Like that was really something we like seeing. You have Access Hollywood and Inside Edition, all these scandalous like all of that.
And then you have like Maury Povich and
yeah. We were really into. I think we got a little more entertainment out of if we felt better about ourselves or what it was. And we still do the same thing with social media nowadays, but
I was gonna say that
those same people also have like this whole army of fans of Defenders and stuff. Whereas like in the '90s, it just felt like every Sunday night after The Simpsons or whatever, Cops would be on, and everyone is just watching that. And this is the era of OJ and high speed chase. I think television is really what it is. It's the '90s is really the first time with cable television that like the country is really seeing each other. Now we see each other all the time, and we don't want to see each other. We're all pretty ugly.
That's the benefit, or not the benefit, but that's one of the things about social media is that the internet, we do see everything. We do have everybody, each other. It's all in our face. There's no veil there anymore. There is no curtain to look behind. The curtain to look behind, that's long gone, man. I was watching Phil Donahue earlier today.
Speaking of the 90s.
I think it was even 80s episodes I was watching. One was like Parents of Punkers, and then one was like
it's infamous. Yeah, they're in like Chicago. Yeah.
And then I watched the one with the New York hardcore scene, and I was just like, man, this stuff is wild, dude.
There's so many guys too in those crowds that if you look in the comments, they're like, there's so and so that ended up being in this band, or that that's No, it's funny to think of that too, as like in the 80s it was like punk is this social ill. I think we're over that in the 90s, but the cultural commentary, I guess it's more cultural than political commentary, I would say, in the 90s, and it kind of merges back into that with the W. Bush administration in the 2000s.
Always going to be something political to talk about, always, because the world's a disgusting, dark place, man. Not a lot we can do about that at the moment. But it is there's always going to be political punk rock. This band is far more literate on that field or in that spectrum than you might think, based on especially like their like the shenanigans that Fletcher gets up to, and the stuff that the way that Jim looks. He just doesn't look like the kind of guy that would necessarily care about that stuff.
And it's funny because he's an educated dude. He's written books. Like he actually,
and that is kind of crazy.
He's
bro.
not that much different,
smarter than you would think.
Like
just by looking at him.
Last time I said, and it's kind of funny that like Pennywise is like Bad Religion's juvenile delinquent little brother.
I mean,
which is true, but they're also like clearly from the same family, and you have like these really intelligent people at the top, because at the same time, all of these songs, like the thing that he studied, I think was like spiritualism and individuality. So that
That is
actually makes
wild.
sense of songs like My Own Way and Victim of Reality, and Badge of Pride.
Yeah.
It is, and I think that's it goes on to our other discussion of instead of like, unfortunately, it's a little more atomized. There's a little less of we the people, I guess, the way that you would maybe in the 80s or the 2000s, where it's like I am stuck in this bubble of society. How do I achieve this sort of personal freedom? So it might be a little less
Right.
collective, but also might be just Jim's the way Jim thinks about things and thinks about the
I
world and
think
that
that
sort of
he's
thing.
much smarter than people give him credit for.
Yeah, no,
People like to like crap on people on every. We all do it. I think I've done it.
yeah,
I
it's probably Fletcher's fault. Let's be honest. It's probably Fletcher's fault that it's thought of
Everything's
that way.
Fletcher's fault.
Most things is generally like if you're at a party and stuff is going wrong, it's probably Fletcher's fault.
You're not wrong there, man. That guy. I want to party with that dude so bad.
I do too
I
with
don't
like
know that it would be.
an
Sorry, I'm
immunity
looking for
of
something to tell you about. I can't find it, so I want to
no,
put the
I
stupid
do
thing
want to
down.
I want the skin on the wall of having partied with Fletcher. I don't know, I had like a few shots of vodka the other night and I was like sick for 2 days. I don't know if I necessarily want the everything else that's going to come along. And by the way, all these guys, they got all these health issues, all this stuff. You get the feeling that Fletcher is like healthy as a horse here. He's just ticking along, man.
It's because he drinks so much, huh?
It is like like there's like 10 drunks in the world. So I'm not recommending this to anyone, but they like pickle themselves and preserve themselves, like they ferment themselves. And
With
as long as,
vodka and tequila.
yeah, Fletcher just can't stop drinking. If he stops drinking, the insides will fall out. So we got
Yeah, I mean that might actually be true. You know, remember at the Punk Rock Museum they had the Fletcher, and you got like a
the
Pringles can dumped into the plate, and then that thing was full of beer.
which apparently he really does. I love the story in the Epitaph documentary that they celebrated some album release, and Fletcher's way of celebrating it was lighting the entire bar on fire and then going on the roof, and then there's the biggest
Good
night
grief.
like Epitaph, and like it ended with police helicopters getting Fletcher off the roof of some bar.
That's insane.
and so going forward with the band, it's kind of funny with the two members, whereas Jim is this guy that's branded himself as the punk rock dad. He's got the 3 kids and all of this,
Right.
and then he's right next
His
to
wife
Fletcher.
is so normal looking. I feel bad for her sometimes.
Yeah, and then he's right next to Fletcher, who is just this eternal party. Like it's not surprising at all that Fletcher and Fat Mike are such good friends. But I know
Dude, for
Fletcher's
real.
like the mature one of that group. Although
Wow.
still, like I think mature in the fact that like if we were all hanging out, like Fletcher wouldn't say as many things to piss you off. But if we were all hanging out, Fletcher's also more likely to have like broken your couch because he did like a
terrible.
flip off your counter.
That is terrible news.
Yeah, I just want to hang out with Fletcher now. What the hell? That was the whole point of that
Dude,
conversation.
I definitely want to hang out with Fletcher. That guy seems awesome.
Another I think probably underrated intelligent dude too, because every time I hear him speak about pretty much anything, he knows what the heck he's talking about. I think he's a
Yeah.
pretty crucial
Is he a low key nerd kind of?
Yeah, I don't think he's necessarily educated in the way that like Fat Mike and these guys and Jim and these guys kind of are, but he definitely he understands music when he talks about it and some of the parts
Okay.
of that. And then he was always a guy that I think was hanging out with Jay Bentley and everyone else at the Epitaph office and learning how to like move stuff around it. Fletcher's probably a guy that you just like, he's that buddy that kind of just never goes away when you hang around him, so you're always just kind of doing the thing, man.
That's probably me too.
Yeah,
degree.
you would probably fit that, where you're just always sort of like whatever we're doing, you're coming with us and you're doing that.
Man, I do kind of want to go hang out with Fletcher. I want to meet. There's a lot of punk rock dudes that are guys that you and I look up to that I would love to hang out with just for a little while, man, and just get to know them. There's a lot of great people in this scene. There's a lot of crappy people everywhere. You can't escape that. But in the punk rock, man, I think there's just a ton of like really great people that are far deeper than we realize on the surface. Because I mean, think about it. I would say that even you and I qualify for this. On the surface, we might seem a certain way, but once you get to know us, we're different people. I would say that I'm specifically like that. I have a lot of problems with like my communication. I don't know how to like I get angry really quick. I have anger issues, but I also always sound abrasive and angry when I'm not. And I think that I don't know where I'm going off on this tangent, but like, you know,
It kind of describes like a band like Pennywise, though, that always does
yeah,
sound kind of angry and abrasive. And as you said, once you start getting into these songs, they're pretty deep. They're pretty introspective. They have a lot of. It's not just the cliche of like the punk rockers shaking their fist at society. There's plenty of that, but again, and there's even uplifting songs in this like. Was still
they've
still
got
Can't Breathe
they've got some of
Gray
that in all their
and
music though,
yeah,
don't they?
and like every album has like one or two of this, and I think most great punk albums actually have like that one sort of like uplifting song in the midst of a lot of their critique. This album I'm looking at, because I'm just looking at the Wikipedia page. I heard a lot of these songs initially. I had this album early on, but I always say I had Live at the Key Club. That was the first Pennywise album I had, which had a lot of these songs. It was that live album. And then I got this one shortly after. I used to fall asleep a lot with this album. I had one of those like 5 CD changers. And for whatever reason, this album just like got in that, it never made it to like my truck. And so late at night, you'd be laying. And so you kids these days are on your TikToks and stuff, falling asleep with your videos on repeat. We used to go with 6 CD changers with the thing just blasting in your head, as if that's a good way to, like fall asleep and stuff.
Dude.
And you're just listening to Land of the Free right there.
I used to have headphones that were very similar to this, and I would fall asleep like this all the time. I should be able to hear you still, I think. Yeah, they're plugged in. Okay. Yeah. And I would just be like, I fall asleep like this. I bought these for Parker. He's my co-host during the week now.
Oh, nice.
He sits in his little chair next to me, and he puts these on, and he listens to music with me. And him being 3, it's very entertaining. I mean, he's still a 3-year-old, so it's kind of a pain in the butt. But I'm on dad duty during the week, so nothing I can do about it. Nor would I want to, man. It's awesome. I have a great life. What am I talking about? But I have like the over-the-ear, like, but they were the ones with the foam, though. They were about the same size, but they had like the foam,
circles, like flat
and it had like a
circles,
Discman, and it had a button you could hit, and the button would be repeat. So you do it, and I would waste my whole batteries, just fall asleep, listening to Out Come the Wolves, listening to. So you mentioned that Live at the Key Club was your first Pennywise record. My parallel to that would be that my first Bad Religion record was All Ages, and I think that those are great examples of entry point punk band records. You know what I'm saying? You can, hey, get to know Pennywise with this one. Hey, get to know about I Heard They Suck Live was my first NoFX album. I don't think Rancid has one, do they?
No, and they don't really have like a greatest hits either. Like
they've got Live on a Drive, which is a bootleg, but it is a live album and it's really good.
I'm looking at Live at the Key Club. They actually like have like almost no songs straight ahead on there. That's my brain. That was my brain merging those two because I had them about similar times. I mean, they were released a year apart, so they're kind of.
Live at the Key Club is a year apart from Straight Ahead. What year before, a year after?
It was a year after. It was in 2000. So pretty good run they had, though. They had Straight Ahead, then they had Live at the Key Club, and then Land of the Free came out in 01. So that was
Land of the Free is the one that I really like.
Yeah, that's
as if I don't like the other records.
That's a heavy contender for number 1 on my list and number 1 on I think most people's list. After 2003, From Ashes is still very good. They just like Fletcher tried playing guitar for a few albums, and that was like not the greatest of decisions. I thought, at least.
I like From the Ashes a lot, actually.
That's good. I just generally think their 90s stuff is just a hair better than that. But
okay, I mean, again, I kind of lump it in with the same stuff.
Yeah, it's not that different. I just generally draw a line right at that album with some of that stuff. Again, Pennywise releases pretty much really good albums for about 30 years now. So it's
I mean, everything that they put out is very high quality in my opinion. Let me switch my headphones back. These don't sound as good.
You're reminding me now of the other thing I used to do is I had the headphones that I could just hear just audibly just enough, but only I could hear it. So I would try to avoid that, and I'd have those next to me, but it would never work out. I'd always pull the thing out. I did have the radio one time. This is funny. So my stepdad was like this war veteran with PTSD.
Oh, jeez, Louise.
There was the Rage Against the Machine song that's something that's like destroy all nations across and it was like played. Apparently he had an episode. He was mad at, he was screamed at me the next day.
What?
Yes.
Dude, that sucks.
I was always running afoul of him with my alternative lifestyle over here.
I mean, war is nasty and PTSD is very, very real, man.
It is, and a lot of that, like a lot of dealing with him, he was very much like that man, kind of like making these kind of rules and so, and like a lot of like these songs, I definitely think about him. I think of him a lot more fondly these days, but I do think of him kind of like in that sort of way. And it was like that generation at that time, like that Vietnam generation in the
That boomer
90s are like,
generation.
yeah, they're like the authority figures. And I'll be honest, I still kind of don't like that generation. Like I always feel like and it's nothing against you if you're in Vietnam. Again, you're very old at this point if you fought in Vietnam. I'm just saying, I always
Yes.
tended to clash with like the Vietnam vet crowd for whatever
Well,
reason.
I think there's a reason. It's because we're punk rockers and we don't particularly care for like war. I mean,
Hmm.
not that. I mean, how do I say this? I'm gonna come off sound like a real asshole, but like as a man, I am proud to be American. I love my country, but I think we do a lot of stupid crap. I'm not about war. I think we've gotten to where we only want war because it's a monetary thing for us. That's
Hmm.
disgusting, I think. I think it's absolutely filthy. We've sold our entire country. You know what I'm saying? And I don't want to get
Hmm.
into some big political debate. Actually, you know what? I do have a question that I want to talk about for a second.
Okay.
It doesn't pertain to Pennywise necessarily, but we can rope them into it a little
All
bit.
right.
I don't like politics very much. I
Hmm.
don't like talking about it. I don't know a ton about it. I'm not going to act like I do. I know what I do and don't believe in. I know if I hear something that sounds messed up to me. And I've often said, maybe not often, but a few times I've said, I don't like this song because it's, too political for me. And I'm just not really wanting to hear that right now. Or I don't necessarily want that in all my punk rock. And people have gotten really, really upset by that. And they say, but don't you like punk? If you like punk, how could you not like a political song? Does punk rock have to be political?
No, no.
Right.
Yeah, like I mean, they have some political song. Are the Descendants political? Are the Ramones political?
It's
No.
weird though, right? When you hear people in the punk rock community say stuff like that, they're like, "Well, you have to like so and so because you're a punk, and punks like." Dude, punk rock didn't start off political.
No, I mean, I think if you don't want any politics in
English
your
stuff did more than the American stuff. Sorry.
yeah, if you don't want any politics in your music, it would be a very hard genre to be a fan of. I think
Yeah,
generally, and I do think although there's plenty of conservative punk and right wing punk, and there's a lot of it out there. I do think there's a general core set of values that you do assume about people into punk, kind
I
of
agree.
politically, and like you were just mentioning, like the anti-war thing, like that. Pretty much the whole history of punk. There's never really been, I don't think, a pro-war punk movement, other than maybe some of the stuff that was opposing, like the Rocky Lynch
Right.
Bush stuff, and that stuff was just like Michael Graves and like four other guys. So it didn't really get it
That's
didn't really get
crazy.
going. So there's a few other things I think like the and I don't even think these are necessarily like leftist things or whatever, but like the general respect for individuals and the right to live and all that kind of stuff. I generally feel like that's a general core principle that people do have in punk, and a lot of punk music expresses that. I don't think punk needs to be political, or you never necessarily need to be a fan of political art to be into punk. I just think it would be kind of limiting if you were completely like anemic to all that.
Yeah, and I've misspoken plenty, and I've contradicted myself plenty. I'm not going to claim that I don't or haven't or won't again in the future. I think that it's natural to contradict yourself when you talk a lot, and I also think that I am very contradicting in just my personality and my feelings. I am very black and white, hot and cold. I don't have a lot of gray areas. So some days I feel like I don't like this at all. Some days I'm like, I love it. And I don't really, it's not for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily like it either sometimes. I'm not a perfect person. I say all that so that I can say that I've often spoke and I say things in like generalities or like absolute terms when I don't necessarily mean that. And it's stupid. I'm trying to not do that so much. But I've said like I don't like political music, which is stupid because I love punk rock music and there's a lot of it. I would say it's probably a 50-50 split or better. Uh, but to say that you have to like a political song because you're a punk, or that like one of the examples would be that I don't like what was that song Denzel Curry covered? He covered a Rage Against the Machine song. Let's see. You know who Denzel Curry is?
Sure.
He's a rapper.
I thought Steph Curry and Denzel Washington had a kid or something.
They did, and it is Denzel. I'm kidding. Let's see. What
Okay, I recognize
songs?
his face now that I'm googling him.
I can't remember what song he covered, but he covered
A Rage Against
he
the Machine
covered a
song?
Rage Against the Machine song. It might have been "Killing in the Name of." Anyways, I didn't like it because I just didn't need
Oh,
that. I don't remember
Bulls
what
on Parade. It was Bulls on Parade.
is that what it was?
Oh.
I don't like Rage Against the Machine. That's what I said. I said I don't like Rage Against the Machine, and people were pissed off because I didn't like Rage Against the Machine because I'm a punk rocker, and I'm like, how does that?
And that's I get it because that used to be our joke. It's every punk rocker's favorite metal band is Rage Against the Machine. But again, I don't think it's
That's a terrible joke. That band sucks.
Yeah, we used to say it. Tom
Really?
Morello,
That was a thing.
yeah,
Huh?
and then Tom Morello producing the Anti-Flag records kind of also brought that home a little bit too.
I don't. Sometimes I don't want to hear it. You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes I'm feeling it, sometimes I'm not. But it is an interesting question because a lot of people feel like punk rock is a political movement, and I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think you have a political punk rock movement, and you also have stuff like drunk punks, dude. Like Casualty songs aren't political by and large. Like they've
got mostly I would say their songs are mostly political.
What? Hold on, dude. Man, like I must be tripping. I'm not even saying you're wrong.
If we're going to say the Pennywise songs are political, I would say the Casualties have about the same sort of.
What? I pulled up their top 5.
Okay.
Unknown Soldier, I would say it's probably political. Yeah. We Are All We Have, not a political song.
More like a bro hymn type, but yeah.
RAMNES, not a political song. Get Off My Back, not a political song. Punk Rock Love, not a political song. So I'm not saying they don't have plenty of them. I'm just saying when you think Casualties, you don't necessarily think politics. Right?
Do, but that's me.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Now the Unseen, maybe a little more. A Global Threat, maybe a little bit more.
That whole scene, I kind of think as very political is maybe.
I guess I look at it as like a split. My point was that I don't. There's plenty of like drunk punk bro hymn songs out there, and so sometimes I guess it's a stupid argument, and all things said. But like, I just was curious because I often think about it because I thought, man, am I tripping? Am I wrong? Because people think like if you're into punk, you have to be into political stuff, and a lot of times I am. You know what it is that I don't like to talk about it a lot because I don't. When I'm talking about music, I'm usually talking about stuff that I love. It's more of a personal thing than it is a political thing, but a lot of that is personal politics. See, I'm working it out in this own little segment here.
No, it's like I don't really talk politics with almost anyone, and I have extremely strong political like feelings and stuff. And I just don't I don't enjoy that type of discourse to have it. So I generally can see where you're coming from with that. I also do think that is a function though of kind of earlier what we talked about of that. So you're very much, and so am I, like everything I like is very much in the 90s, but I meet a lot of guys like about closer to about your age that have more of that sentiment. And I just think it was again, the way that 90s stuff was kind of presented.
So as in like, they don't want to have political crap in their music.
Yeah. But it's funny because
or their entertainment, I guess is the right word.
Yeah. And it's, well, or they don't really associate it with their punk as explicitly, I would say.
Yeah.
And it's funny because those guys love all the bands are, Bad Religion, Pennywise, Rancid, Propaganda. They love all those bands who have tons and tons of political songs. I just think
it's weird.
Yeah,
I feel like an idiot sometimes.
I find I was like, again, like if you say you didn't like even you're a contradiction a little bit saying you don't really care for politics in your music, and we've just waxed poetic for an hour about Pennywise. Like,
well, that's kind of what my point was, is that like maybe I don't understand that I'm listening to very, very political music, or it's not. You know what it is I don't want to like discuss it. I think is what the real deal is like I don't want to get on a video and talk politics when I'm listening to music, even if it's a political song. I think that's more or less where I'm going.
Yeah, that's
and I didn't
exactly
know
what it is.
And I don't know really. I just thought about it when we were talking about it earlier about how their songs are very political. But it's like I think arching political I'm really into, but like focused political I'm not. As in. Maybe this is maybe I'm working some things out here. I don't really care for Bad Religion. Like I like Bad Religion. I accept that they're a very great band. I own a couple of their records. I go see them live. They're not like a go-to band for me. The Dead Kennedys, exactly the same. I accept that they're a great band. I recognize it. I appreciate what they've done for the scene. But Jello Biafra is not really my cup of tea, and I don't really care to see them play live. I don't think I own any of their records. Like, but I like them, but they're not like a go-to band. When you tell somebody that you don't like a band, I think that makes them think that you means you actively dislike them, and that's not. I'll tell you if I actively dislike a band. I'll say no, they suck. When I say I don't like that band, it just means that I don't like the band. I don't go out and buy their records. I don't own a shirt. I don't go see them in shows. A perfect example would be the Clash or the Damned. The Clash, I would almost say I dislike, but like the Damned, I don't care. The Clash, I've learned a little bit about their first couple of records over the last like few weeks, so I'm starting to come around a little bit, and I like some of their hits. But like, I don't like London Calling. I don't like Combat Rock. Right? I dislike those records, but their first two albums, I don't know. It's a weird thing, but I'm just saying, like, when I talk like that, I'm not very good at communicating my thoughts, I guess. Is that what it is? Maybe that I'm not really good at.
Possibly. I think it's more. I think you don't necessarily want to always have the conversation about it. Was what you said.
Yeah.
And like I completely empathize with that. Like even on my channel, I've stayed away from certain like stuff that I feel strongly about, even in the politics, for just not wanting to do it. Like it is annoying, some of the comments like you'll get on something that's very sort of non-political that you'll post about someone that's considered a political figure, and it's like it has nothing to do with what we're talking about at hand, and that generally can just be annoying.
Yes. So okay, on the same like line of conversation, with this situation that I've had the last week, I don't need to get into it. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. If you don't know what I'm talking about and you want to know, message me privately and I'll talk to you privately about it. How do you feel about being held down to every single word that you've ever said? Like, are you allowed to A, change your mind about something, and B, do you think you're expected to never ever contradict yourself? And if that's the case, do you think that's a little bit wild?
Yeah, I mean that would be an unsustainable standard to either like it'd be dumb. I'm glad people like, I used to think this was a smart thing to do. Glad I changed my mind about that. Like I think changing our mind is a pretty fundamental part of like learning as human beings and growing and stuff. And being held to everything that's just the shittiness of the internet. To be honest with you, it's because the internet's in ink, so every take you have, everything you've ever said is kind of there. Now, that's different from like necessarily saying to something that's just completely like awful, which again, I believe you can also change for that. But like I've said stuff on our show that's very benign that I think of like, wow, I have a completely different opinion on that a month later or 2 months later, or I've tried, and I always said like, I try to preface everything I say with all the information I have now. Here's how I feel. Or here's how I think. Well, as time goes on, that input of information tends to change, and you're going to adjust. And I don't think that's great. Like I don't mind sometimes, especially if it's like a really public figure. If you sort of can dunk on it, like, no, you said this, but you meant this. That is a different thing. Like if it's like a political figure who is, or anyone that's a public figure that's saying something and then doing actively something else, that is different from having one sort of opinion or take or saying something and then changing. As long as your change is for a good faith reason, that's the other part about it. If you're just changing to change to be controversial because you're taking money from someone, that's a little different.
Okay, so I'm having this internal struggle right now because sometimes I say things in the heat of the moment and I don't necessarily mean it to be like in stone, even though it sounds like I might mean that or whatever. But like as an example, I mentioned not blocking people on the internet, but what I meant by that is like in this conversation right now, I'm not blocking you or turning you off. I'm not whatever. And this dude's like, yeah, but you said you would block me before. I'm like, yeah, but clearly I didn't. But I said I would. So and then I said I would never do that. So I need to work harder at not saying things like with finality and like totality. Like I'm never going to do this. It's really hard because sometimes you say stuff in the heat of the moment. I'm learning about myself with all this stuff going on with her. With Aaron Miklo, I'm learning a lot about myself because like I want to be empathetic for stuff that people go through, right? And then I find myself talking about people that I don't agree with, and it puts me in this really weird situation to where I don't know how to behave because I'm like, no, man, like I want to be a good dude, I want to be a stand-up guy, I want to be a good person, but I absolutely feel this way about this situation, person, thing, company, entity, or being, right? That situation just happens to be the most recent thing that would make me think about this. But it is this thing I struggle with because even when I argue with somebody in the comments about stuff, if anybody thinks that I don't think about this stuff and that I'm not conscious of this and that I don't take it to heart, I would love to just say that's not the case. It is something that I've struggled with in the past week, man. This is a weird. I don't even know how we got to this point, other than it started with like politics and like saying things.
Yeah.
But when you say stuff and it's like, I don't know how you can to like hold me to everything I've ever said on a podcast. That's just so crazy when we've got literally. I think this is like my 97th episode of an hour or more per, and I'm like, you're gonna hold me to everything I've ever said. First, I do think it's irresponsible to say things just willy-nilly. Okay, I get that, and I agree with that. But like, man, when you're talking passionately about stuff, man, you'll say some stupid shit. I have to like acknowledge that is what I'm looking for. I have to acknowledge that, man. I gotta do better, man. And I don't even know where I'm coming up with this. It's been in my brain all day because I stand behind my feelings about certain people and things and stuff, but I really don't want to be a shit person. I don't like, man, this whole situation's got me all fucked up emotionally, to be honest with you, man. It's yeah, it's gnarly, dude. Like I don't regret doing anything, but I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot, dude. Like I don't, yeah, I don't want to go into it anymore because I'm not trying to derail our conversation any further than I already have. But I did want to ask you about the political thing because it genuinely stresses me out because I understand the question or like the accusation or whatever to a degree, but I think it's so dumb because I like punk rock and I'm a punk rock guy. I have to always be interested in political stuff. It blows me away that it's probably youngsters talking to me that I can't tell. It's usually on a text thread or something, or people that have nothing to do with punk rock and have no idea what it really is. They see punk rock and an anarchy symbol and think that everything has to be political and anti-government, and that's just so short-sighted and naive. But yeah. Let's talk about pop punk some. Well, dude, this stuff really, really does bother me quite a bit, man. I don't know. I'm not a perfect person, nor do I think that's a attainable goal. But I try to hold myself to the standards that I hold other people to. You know what I'm saying? And
it's a difficult standard. Even your own standard can be
yeah,
difficult.
Yeah. So for anybody out there that doesn't like me, not a lot I can do about that.
Why are you watching like an hour and 12 minutes in if you don't like him? By the way, if we're still here,
yo, dude, no. In all sincerity, man, people watch that entire interview and hate me, and not very many. Most people were like in the same feelings as I was having. But there was a few people where I was like, bro, why are you watching a 2-hour podcast that I'm hosting if you don't like me at all? And then I was like, oh, they probably just really like her, I would think, right? That has to be what it is. That's just, if they didn't like either of us, that's a weird thing to spend your time doing. Oh man, that would suck.
Those are like the people that just consume way too much content generally. So those are the people with like true internet brain. They go out in the sun, people like.
Facts. Well, this dude, I'll talk about who he was for a second because I would love to hear your response to this. But he was like telling me he was doing a review of the interview for his zine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was one of those kind of guys where like he really wanted to virtue signal how good a person he was, and like I guess he never contradicts himself. He never says things that he doesn't quite mean. It was really a strange like thread of talking back and forth, but. If he sees this, man, what's your deal, bud? Like, bro, chill. Like,
yeah, and give me some good pub in your zine there. If you're watching all the way.
I mean, look. At first, I thought he was being kind of cool, and then I realized that I think he's trying to do like a smear job on me or something. But I'm not really sure. I could be way off on that. But I will likely never talk to that person again because I don't have the energy to argue with somebody that I don't think I'm ever going to agree with, man. Oh my goodness, dude. Okay, so next week we're going to talk pretty much pop punk the whole episode. Blink 182, Enema of the State, is turning 25 years old. Now, if that doesn't make it feel old, I don't know what will. And then we're going to do the Donnas. That's what I was looking for earlier. I kept like looking at things and getting sidetracked. I was trying to find out which album it was we were doing for the Donnas. Let's see. My mouth is killing me. This tooth thing sucks, broski. All right.
So we're gonna do the album from '99, right? Because I think they had one. Yeah.
Yeah. Why? I hate when they don't put the right year on Spotify. They
Oh,
put like the
Spotify. It's always a
updated.
year. It's always a year ahead of time. I don't know. Yeah,
Well, they
that
also
doesn't.
only do like the re-release year. It's stupid.
So we are doing Get Skin Tight.
Oh, that's right. It is Get Skin Tight. I'm an idiot, bro. I knew that. Okay. Two very different albums
Mm-hmm.
that also are in the same like pop punk category almost. It's a
That,
very
that would be right
weird.
next to each other in a store. Yeah, when
Yeah.
you were reaching in,
Uh,
and then we'll litigate too. Once and for all, if the Donnas killed Lookout Records, because that is the prevailing narrative. So we'll kind of in preparation for this, I gotta go take out my Lookout Records book and go ahead and sort of refresh myself on all of that stuff.
Send me anything that you want me to look at for that. I would love to have more information. I like the Donnas, but I don't know a lot about that part of it. I mean, I never was a history lesson guy. I listened to music. I liked what I liked. I listened to the CDs, and I didn't dive into it. And then whenever the internet came about, I was outside. So I sometimes wish this is the age where, I mean, I'm learning all this stuff like on the job. It's awesome. Like I learned things about stuff that I've loved, and it's like people don't understand how I could love something so much and not know all of its history. And I'm like, bro, I mean, I love hamburgers. I don't know how they were concocted the very first time or why. I don't care.
You're a hamburger poser.
I am a hamburger poser.
No, the Donalds will be a fun, especially if you don't know much about that.
I love the Donnas. They're
like
good,
a
man.
fun conversation to have it. They're strange for a band that didn't blow up, and this is our little teaser. Strangely, like kind of consequential band in the history of like pop punk and kind of how it all ended up. I will say too, for a little bit of pre-reading for a more mass release is there's also a full chapter in Dan Ozzy's Sellout book. They get their own chapter.
The Donnas or
the Blink actually has a chapter too, but it's more focused on Dude Ranch actually.
Yeah, I'm actually reading that book right now.
Yeah, so there's some Donna stuff in there I'm
It's
excited to talk.
Thank you for the recommendation, by the way.
Yeah, it's really good for this show too because you can kind of jump around it.
Yeah.
And we've done a lot of
it's all
we've done a lot of
specific bands
episodes
per chapter
recently. Green Day, Blink, Jawbreaker, My Chemical Romance, who all have chapters in that book, so that really helps. No, what's going to be fun too is going through that is like the Donnas are not something that really exists anymore in the same way. So it's going to be one of our. It won't be like a super short digging up this thing from the past because it'll be a little more tentacles to it. And I think talking about it in the context too of Enema of the State will be really really helpful because literally it's around the same time period and
well, since they both came out in the same year, it's cool because while I think they were like just miles apart in like social status, core audience, at the same time they weren't.
Yeah.
So yeah, whatever that means. I think you can find people that would not associate them together at all, and then people like us who are going to say that they absolutely fit very closely together. I figured out the following week's like twofer, man. It is the most opposite twofer we can get. Weezer Blue Album. U.S. bombs the world because it hits 25 years like the week after that in the middle of June. So, yeah, dude, we'll do Weezer Blue Album and then U.S. bombs the world. Two albums that I love and two albums that don't sound nothing alike.
That'll be an insane episode. I love that. Man,
I went straight therapy session on you guys. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
This is, dude, I struggle with this stuff, man. I work really hard at being a stand-up dude, and I fall short many, many times, man. So I will hold myself accountable like anybody else. I just also think I'm in a weird situation right now because I also don't think I did necessarily anything that I personally feel was wrong. So it's so weird, man. I'm in a weird headspace right now, but I think that stuff is entertaining to people. I think they like to see drama and internal feelings, and if I can't be myself on here and I can't open up to my audience, like I feel like that's bullshit, man. I feel like you have to be able to do that. Now, do we want to do it every week? Of course not, man. But occasionally something in the life of the channel or in my life is important enough to talk about and digest and dissect. And honestly, you're my friend. I don't talk to you a lot outside of this podcast, so sometimes I just want to talk to you about stuff. And I think that's what gives this show a unique spin, and I'm willing to be critiqued by everybody, man. It is what it is, man. You have to be willing to understand and accept that not everybody's going to like you. And when you do stuff like podcasting and record reviews, and you talk about something that you love, when people from that community don't like you, as Aaron Miklo will tell you, it sucks. It just depends on, things that I'm not going to talk about right now. But yeah, man, it's tough, dude. It's tough to deal with all this stuff, man. It's tough to even be like heavily favored in a situation that I didn't ask to be in. It's so strange. But until next week, I will hopefully not be thinking about this at all anymore.
We got to think about the Donnas, so we got work to do.
I mean, dude, I'll think about the Donnas.
I'm sure you will.
there's worse things you could think about, like getting my stupid tooth pulled. Yeah, oh my goodness, fun. Bro! Yeah. Oh, it's gonna suck, man.
There's a whole punk rock album right there, just about getting your tooth pulled and the pain.
Facts. Well, I made them on like I have to go talk to the surgeon, and on there I made them say that they would put me to sleep during this. I'm not going in there and being like, yeah, just put a thing in my gums, and then nah, bro. Knock me out and do it. And they were like, well, if they're going to put you under, they should do 2 things and get it both. I said, fine, whatever. Do it while I'm asleep. Let me wake up and be like,
oh, come on. You should have gone straight edge with it, bro.
No. No. I have been off of drugs for 11 years, sir. It is time for me to get on them again so that I can get this tooth pulled. Just to be really clear, anybody that's out there being an idiot, no, I don't mean I'm going to start doing drugs again. I just mean I would like to be... Well, yeah, but like to be put to sleep so I can get my tooth pulled. After that, I'll just deal with it. I'm going to take some anti-inflammatories and drink a lot of hot water with salt in it. Not drink it, gargle it. And but no,
right to a guy's house right after the fact. Next week we're going to see with long hair. Look at us.
Oh man. And I know we're just being silly right now, but I am a firm no drug user. Don't do drugs. Like, please, guys, just that's where I stand on that. But they asked me about that, and I asked them about alternative ways around the pain, and they were like, you don't want to take any painkillers? And I was like, I mean, I really don't. And they were like, okay. And the nurse lady was like, oh boy. And I was like, there's got to be something that'll help a little bit. And she's like, I mean, how strong do you think Tylenol will, not Tylenol, ibuprofen will work? And I said, it doesn't really work that well for me because of the history I've got with other things. And she's like, yeah, you're going to have a rough time. And I was like, how long of a rough time? And she's like, I don't know, 3 or 4 days. And I was like, I'll deal with it. I'll just deal with it. It's not 3 or 4 days of mouth pain is not worth like relapsing. And I don't think that I would, but I also think that I'm weak. And I think that there is a chance that I did. And I just don't think it's worth it. I'm too scared is what it is. I'm a pussy. I don't want to risk it. But,
yeah, it doesn't seem,
no, it doesn't. Not to me. My family is too important. Dude, this channel is too important. If I started doing that shit again, this channel would go away. Like I would be a fucking rat immediately, dude. I'd just be a fucking gross piece of shit in like a month. And so I don't want to do that. Yeah, dude, this conversation got fucking weird, man. Welcome to the punk rock therapy sessions couch, folks. Yeah. Well, if you got recommendations, questions, comments, grievances, hate, whatever, man, leave it in the comments. We'll read it. I'll comment on it. Anybody's on Patreon, if you got a request for an episode, let us know. I mean, we're just pulling episodes up, so if you got something you want us to talk about, let me know, especially if you're a patron. I would happily do it for you. Otherwise, we'll see you next week on the Punk Rock Review with Blink-182 and the Donnas. Y'all have a great night. Peace.